The morning rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hawthorne Technologies as Halafera stepped into the marble lobby. Her worn canvas bag contrasted sharply with the gleaming steel and glass surrounding her. She had spent the previous night practicing her introduction, rehearsing answers to potential questions, trying to calm the butterflies that refused to settle in her stomach. This job meant everything. The salary would cover her brother Timothy's medical treatments and maybe, just maybe, leave enough for her to finish her art degree. The elevator rose silently to the 40th floor, depositing her into a reception area that screamed wealth and power. Chrome fixtures caught the gray morning light, and abstract paintings that probably cost more than her entire apartment decorated the walls. A sharp-faced receptionist barely glanced up as Halafera approached. "I'm here to see Mr. Hawthorne. I'm the new personal assistant." The woman's eyes swept over Halafera's simple dress and practical shoes with thinly veiled disdain. "Through those doors, he's expecting you." Julian Hawthorne sat behind a desk carved from a single piece of black walnut, his attention fixed on multiple computer screens. He didn't look up as Halafera entered. She waited, feeling the seconds stretch into an uncomfortable eternity. Finally, he raised his eyes, and she felt the full force of his scrutiny. His features were sharp and aristocratic, his dark suit perfectly tailored, and his gaze held the coldness of someone who had learned to trust no one. "You're late," he said flatly. Halafera glanced at her phone. "Sir, I'm actually 3 minutes early." In my world, early is on time. On time is late. His voice carried no warmth, only assessment. "I've read your resume. Art student, part-time waitress. No relevant experience. Tell me why I shouldn't end this interview right now." She straightened her shoulders, meeting his challenging stare. "Because I'm honest, hardworking, and I learn fast. I don't make the same mistake twice, and I don't give up easily." Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. Everyone says they're honest until the price is right. Everyone claims they're hardworking until something better comes along. Words are cheap. Then judge me by my actions, not my words. For 3 weeks, Halafera proved herself through those actions. She arrived before Julian each morning, organized his chaotic schedule with quiet efficiency, and anticipated his needs before he voiced them. She never complained about the long hours or his curt responses. She learned the names of his key partners, memorized his coffee preferences, color-coded his calendar system until it ran like clockwork. Yet Julian remained distant, his comments laced with suspicion. When she stayed late to finish a presentation, he remarked that she was probably trying to impress him. When she declined an expensive lunch with a vendor, he suggested she was playing hard to get. Each small act of professionalism was twisted into evidence of ulterior motives. Mrs. Patterson, Julian's elderly housekeeper who occasionally visited the office, was the only person who showed Halafera genuine kindness. The silver-haired woman would bring homemade cookies and share stories about Julian's childhood, painting a picture of a boy who once believed in people before the world taught him otherwise. "He wasn't always like this," Mrs. Patterson confided one afternoon over tea. "His mother abandoned the family when he was 12. Then his fiancée Camilla took millions from him before disappearing with his former best friend. The betrayals changed him." Halafera felt a pang of sympathy, but it didn't excuse his treatment of her. She was tired of being judged for crimes she hadn't committed, tired of having her integrity questioned at every turn. The breaking point came at the annual Hawthorne Foundation Charity Gala. Julian had insisted Halafera attend to manage the silent auction logistics. She wore her only formal dress, a simple navy gown she'd found at a thrift store. Among the designer labels and dripping jewels, she felt like an imposter. Julian arrived with a stunning woman on his arm, a corporate attorney named Veronica, who treated Halafera like part of the furniture. Throughout the evening, Halafera coordinated with the caterers, ensured the auction ran smoothly, and handled a technical glitch with the sound system. She was exhausted but satisfied that everything had gone perfectly until Julian's speech. "I want to thank my team for making tonight possible," he said from the stage, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Though I've learned the hard way to keep a close eye on those who handle money. Some people see charity work as an opportunity rather than a calling. His gaze landed on Holofera for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Conversations around her stuttered. Eyes turned in her direction. The implication hung in the air like poison. She felt her face burn with humiliation. Her hands trembled as she set down her clipboard. Everyone in the room now thought she was a thief, or worse, that Julian suspected her of being one. The careful professional reputation she had built crumbled in an instant. Rather than cause a scene, Holofera slipped out to the terrace. The cold night air bit at her bare arms, but she welcomed the physical discomfort as a distraction from the emotional pain. She leaned against the railing, fighting back tears. Maybe her mother had been right. Maybe she didn't belong in this world of glass towers and seven-figure bank accounts. That was subtle, a voice said behind her. She turned to find an older gentleman in a distinguished tuxedo. His kind eyes and warm smile reminded her of her late father. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "Julian's little performance? I've known that boy since he was in diapers. His bark is worse than his bite, but that doesn't make it hurt any less." He extended his hand. "Theodore Blackwell, board member and family friend?" "Holofera Chen," she managed, shaking his hand. "I've been watching you tonight, my dear. Watching how you handle problems without drawing attention. How you treat the staff with respect. How you keep everything running without needing credit or recognition. Those aren't the actions of someone chasing money." His words unlocked something inside her. The tears finally came, quiet and unstoppable. Theodore handed her his handkerchief. "Julian's been hurt badly. He sees threats everywhere now, especially in people who might actually care about him. But I suspect you already know that. Knowing why doesn't make it easier to endure." "No, it doesn't. But perhaps understanding his wounds will help you decide whether he's worth the effort of proving him wrong." Holofera remained on the terrace, turning his words over in her mind. She thought about Julian's occasional moments of vulnerability. The times she'd caught him staring at family photos with profound sadness. The way he'd quietly doubled the salary of an employee facing medical bills. There was good in him, buried under layers of protective cynicism. The question was whether that good was worth fighting for, or whether she should protect her own heart and walk away while she still could. The crisis began on a Tuesday morning with a single email that turned Julian's world upside down. A major investor had pulled out of their latest project, citing concerns about market volatility. Within hours, 3 more followed suit, leaving a $100 million development in jeopardy. The technology center that was supposed to revolutionize renewable energy storage now faced cancellation. Along with hundreds of jobs, Holofera watched Julian transform from controlled businessman to barely contained chaos. He barked orders into his phone, paced his office like a caged animal, and dismissed 3 department heads who couldn't provide immediate solutions. By noon, his typically immaculate desk was buried under reports and projections. "Cancel everything for the rest of the week," he snapped at her. "Get me Roberts from legal, Chen from finance, and someone who actually knows how to save a sinking ship." "Already done," Holofera replied calmly. "Roberts is reviewing the contracts for exit clauses. Chen is preparing alternative funding scenarios, and I've scheduled calls with 4 potential replacement investors. Your first call is in 10 minutes. Julian stopped pacing, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. "When did you arrange all this? When the first email came through? I know you hate being caught off guard, so I started preparing contingencies immediately." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor. "Thank you." They were simple words, but coming from Julian Hawthorne, they felt monumental. The next 72 hours blurred together in a marathon of conference calls, emergency meetings, and endless coffee. Holofera worked alongside Julian, anticipating his needs, organizing information, and occasionally offering quiet suggestions that he, surprisingly, began to consider. She watched him at 2 in the morning, tie loosened and shirt sleeves rolled up, and saw not the cold billionaire but a man fighting desperately to save something he believed in. On the 3rd night, as they reviewed proposals in his penthouse office, Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and immediately silenced it, but not before Holofera caught a glimpse of the name Camilla. "You don't have to answer it," she said softly. He laughed bitterly. "She only calls when she wants something. Money, usually. Or to remind me what a fool I was. You weren't a fool for trusting someone you loved, wasn't I? She stole $3 million and disappeared with my college roommate. If that's not foolish, I don't know what is. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion making him more honest than usual. You want to know why I've been so hard on you? Why I question everything you do. Halafera set down her pen, giving him her full attention. Because you're exactly the type of person I would have fallen for before. Kind, hardworking, genuine. Or at least, that's what Camilla seemed like too. She played the role perfectly for 2 years. I didn't see through it until my accountant found the discrepancies. He stood, walking to the windows that overlooked the glittering city. So when you showed up with your thrift store clothes and your earnest work ethic, every alarm bell in my head went off. I'm not her, Halafera said firmly. I'm starting to realize that. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson arrived at the penthouse the next morning with breakfast, as she'd done for decades. She found them both asleep at the conference table, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. She woke them gently, clucking her tongue at Julian's appearance. You look terrible, dear boy. When did you last eat a proper meal? I don't remember, Julian admitted. Accepting the plate of eggs and toast she offered, Mrs. Patterson turned to Halafera with concern. And you, child? Are you taking care of yourself? I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for asking. The housekeeper studied her for a long moment. You know, I've worked for this family for 35 years. I've seen assistants come and go, each one trying to climb the ladder or snag themselves a wealthy husband. But you're different. You actually care about the work, don't you? I care about doing things right, Halafera replied honestly. My brother Timothy has a rare autoimmune disorder, Halafera said quietly, not looking up from her breakfast. The treatments are experimental and expensive. This job means he gets to stay in the program. It means he gets to keep fighting. Julian froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. You never mentioned a brother. You never asked about my personal life. You made it clear we weren't here to be friends. The words hung in the air. A gentle rebuke that struck harder than any accusation. Mrs. Patterson squeezed Halafera's shoulders supportively before leaving them alone. Julian set down his fork, his appetite suddenly gone. How old is he? 16. He's brilliant, funny, and terrified he won't live to see his 18th birthday. The treatments are working, but they're draining our savings faster than I can replenish them. She met Julian's eyes steadily. That's why I work so hard, Mr. Hawthorne. Not to steal from you or manipulate you, but because every paycheck means my brother has a future. He felt something crack open in his chest, a pain that was somehow cleansing. Why didn't you tell me this during your interview? Because I wanted to be hired for my skills, not your pity. I don't want charity. I want to earn what I'm paid. Julian stood abruptly, walking to the window. The morning sun was painting the city gold, and he felt the weight of his own cruelty crushing down on him. He had spent weeks tormenting this woman, questioning her integrity, publicly humiliating her, all while she carried a burden that would have broken most people. I've been a complete bastard to you, he said quietly. Yes, you have. Her honesty surprised a laugh out of him, short and sharp. Most people would try to soften that. You said you wanted actions, not words. Well, the action of pretending you haven't hurt me would be dishonest. He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw genuine remorse in his eyes. If I could take back the gala speech, I would. If I could erase every suspicious comment and doubtful look, I would. You've been nothing but professional and dedicated, and I've treated you like a criminal waiting to strike. Why the change of heart now? Because I've watched you for 3 days straight. I've seen how you handle pressure, how you think 10 steps ahead, how you never complain, even when you're exhausted. And I heard you on the phone with your brother yesterday. Halafera's eyes widened. She'd taken a quick call during a bathroom break, thinking no one could hear. You told him not to worry about the bills, that you had everything under control. You told him to focus on getting better, that you'd handle the rest. Your voice was so gentle, so full of love. Julian's own voice roughened with emotion. That's not the voice of someone scheming for money. That's the voice of someone who knows what actually matters in life. Tears pricked Halafera's eyes, but she blinked them back. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me make it up to you. Not because I'm your boss, but because you deserve better than how I've treated you." Before she could respond, his phone rang. It was Theodore Blackwell with news that one of the investors he'd contacted was interested. The crisis wasn't over, but hope flickered back to life. Over the next week, as they worked to save the project, something fundamental shifted between them. Julian started asking about Timothy, about Holofera's abandoned art studies, about her dreams beyond survival. She began to see glimpses of the man Mrs. Patterson had described. Someone capable of warmth and humor when he wasn't hiding behind walls. One evening, after successfully securing a new investor, Julian insisted on driving Holofera home. Her apartment was in a neighborhood his GPS seemed uncertain about, a far cry from his penthouse. When she invited him up to meet Timothy, he accepted without hesitation. The apartment was tiny but immaculate, filled with Timothy's artwork and medical equipment. The teenager was thin and pale, but possessed a smile that could light up the room. "So you're the famous Mr. Hawthorne," Timothy said, shaking Julian's hand. "My sister talks about you constantly." Holofera's face flushed crimson. "What do you do?" "Mr. Hawthorne needs this. Mr. Hawthorne wants that. I was starting to think you'd invented him." Julian laughed, genuinely amused. "I assure you, I'm very real. And your sister's being modest. She's the one keeping my entire company running smoothly." They spent an hour talking, and Julian found himself captivated by Timothy's perspective on life. The boy spoke about his illness with matter-of-fact courage, about his dreams of becoming a graphic designer, about how proud he was of his sister's strength. As Julian prepared to leave, Timothy caught his arm. "Take care of her, okay? She never takes care of herself because she's too busy worrying about me." "I promise," Julian said, and meant it. In the car afterward, Julian sat in silence, processing everything he'd seen. Holofera waited, unsure what he was thinking. "I've been living in a fortress of my own making," he finally said, "keeping everyone at arm's length because I was afraid of being hurt again. But watching you with Timothy tonight, seeing the life you've built, despite impossible circumstances, I realized something." "What's that?" "That being afraid to trust is just another way of letting Camilla win. She took my money and my pride, but I let her take my humanity too. I don't want to be that person anymore." Holofera reached over and squeezed his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a bridge being built between two isolated islands. "Then don't be," she said softly. "You get to choose who you want to become." As Julian drove back to his empty penthouse that night, he realized that, for the first time in years, he didn't feel quite so alone. The attack came from where Julian least expected it. Vincent Carver, a rival tech mogul who had lost a major contract to Hawthorne Technologies, decided that if he couldn't beat Julian in business, he would destroy him personally. The weapon he chose was HOL of AIRA. It started with whispers in industry circles, then anonymous posts on financial gossip sites, photos of Holofera entering Julian's penthouse late at night, carefully cropped to remove context, fabricated stories about a struggling art student seducing her way into a billionaire's bed and bank account. The narrative was designed to humiliate them both while painting Holofera as exactly what Julian had once accused her of being. Julian first learned about it from Theodore Blackwell, who called him with barely contained fury. "Have you seen what they're saying about that girl? It's character assassination, pure and simple. Vincent's fingerprints are all over this." Julian pulled up the articles on his computer, his blood turning to ice as he read. They had taken innocent moments, working late, shared car rides, his visit to her apartment, and twisted them into something sordid. The comment section was even worse, filled with people who didn't know Holofera but felt entitled to judge her. "I'll sue every publication that printed this garbage," Julian snarled. "I'll just give the story legs. You need to get ahead of this, and you need to protect her." "Where is she now?" "She called in sick this morning, said she had a migraine." Realization hit him like a truck. She's already seen it. Julian was out the door within minutes, driving too fast through morning traffic to reach Holofera's apartment. He pounded on the door until Timothy answered, his young face tight with worry. "He won't come out of her room." She's been crying since last night. Julian's heart clenched. Can I see her? Timothy hesitated, then nodded. Room on the left. But be warned, she's really upset. He found Halifera curled on her bed, still in yesterday's clothes, her eyes swollen from tears. The laptop beside her displayed one of the vicious articles. When she saw him, she sat up quickly, trying to compose herself. You shouldn't be here. It'll just make things worse. I don't care what anyone thinks. I came to make sure you're okay. Okay? Her laugh was hollow. My name is being dragged through the mud across the internet. People I've never met are calling me a gold digger, a manipulator, worse. My professors have seen this. Timothy's doctors have probably seen this. And it's all lies. But that doesn't matter, does it? The damage is done. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, careful to leave space between them. Vincent Carver is behind this. He's trying to hurt me through you. Then he succeeded. Because I can't work for you anymore. Every time we're seen together, it'll just fuel the story. I'll find another job somehow. I'll manage. No. The word came out harder than he intended. You're not quitting. You're not letting him win. This isn't about winning. Halifera's voice broke. This is about my reputation, my dignity. I've worked so hard to build a life, to support Timothy, to prove that I'm more than my circumstances. And now everyone thinks I'm exactly what you accused me of being on my first day. The reminder of his own cruelty hit Julian like a physical blow. I was wrong about you. Completely inexcusably wrong. Being wrong in private is one thing, but this is public. This is permanent. Years from now, when someone searches my name, this is what they'll find. Julian's phone buzzed insistently. His PR team, his lawyers, his board members, everyone wanting to know how to handle the scandal. He silenced it all. Then we changed the narrative. We tell the truth. The truth. Halifera shook her head. That I'm your assistant, who works hard and goes home to take care of her sick brother? That's not sexy enough to compete with their lies. No, the truth that I fell in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Halifera's eyes widened, her breath catching. What did you say? Julian ran his hands through his hair, suddenly feeling more vulnerable than he had in years. I didn't plan to tell you like this. I wanted to wait until the crisis was over, until I could do it properly. But sitting here, watching you hurt because of my world, my enemies, I realize I can't wait anymore. Julian, you don't love me? You barely tolerate me most days. That's not true and hasn't been for weeks. He moved closer, his voice urgent. Yes, I was terrible to you at first. Yes, I questioned your every move and treated you with suspicion you never deserved. But somewhere between your quiet competence and your fierce dedication to your brother, between your refusal to accept unearned gifts and your ability to see through my defenses, I fell for you. Halifera stood abruptly, pacing the small room. This is insane. You're a billionaire. I'm a struggling art student who can barely keep her head above water. We live in different worlds. I used to think that mattered. I used to think wealth and status were what separated people into categories. But you've shown me something different. You've shown me that integrity, kindness, and strength of character matter more than any bank balance. He stood too, closing the distance between them. When I'm with you, I'm not Julian Hawthorne, the CEO. I'm just a man who wants to be better than he was. I'm scared, she whispered. What if Vincent is right? What if I am just a poor girl reaching above her station? Then we're all reaching. Every single one of us trying to be more than our circumstances, to build something meaningful. There's no shame in that. He cupped her face gently, wiping away a tear with his thumb. But you're not reaching, Halifera. You're standing exactly where you belong on your own merit and your own strength. She searched his eyes, looking for any hint of deception or pity. What she found instead was raw honesty and something that looked terrifyingly like love. If we do this, if we're together, it won't be easy. People will always assume the worst. They'll say I'm using you, that you're slumming. We'll be scrutinized constantly. Let them talk. I spent years hiding behind walls to protect myself from being hurt. But the irony is, those walls didn't protect me at all. They just made me lonely and bitter. You walked into my life and slowly dismantled every defense I had. You made me remember what it feels like to trust someone, to care about someone beyond myself. Halafera felt her own walls crumbling. You really hurt me, you know? Those first weeks, the things you said, the way you looked at me like I was already guilty. I know, and I'm so sorry. If I could go back and change it, I would. But I can't. All I can do is promise to spend every day proving that I'm not that man anymore. That I see you for who you really are, an incredibly strong, compassionate, talented woman who deserves so much better than the hand life dealt her. I don't need better. I just need honest. Then I'll be honest. I'm terrified right now. Terrified that I've ruined any chance I had with you. Terrified that my baggage and my world will only bring you more pain. But I'm more terrified of not taking this chance, of letting you walk away and spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. She closed the final distance between them, her hands finding his. I'm terrified too, of being hurt again, of not being enough, of disappointing Timothy by making a choice based on my heart instead of practical necessity. What does your heart want? Halafera took a shaky breath. It wants to believe that this is real, that a man like you could actually care about a woman like me, that we could build something together despite everything against us. Then believe it, because it's the truest thing I've ever felt. He kissed her then, soft and tentative at first, as if she might shatter. But when she kissed him back, it deepened into something profound, a promise and an apology and a beginning all at once. When they finally broke apart, Halafera rested her forehead against his. What do we do about Vincent? About the articles? We hold a press conference. Today we tell everyone exactly who you are and what you mean to me. No hiding, no spinning, just the truth. That's a terrible PR strategy, he laughed. Probably. But I'm done playing games. If I've learned anything from you, it's that honesty is its own power. That afternoon, Julian called an emergency press conference at Hawthorne Technologies. The media descended like vultures, expecting scandal and fireworks. What they got instead was something entirely different. Julian stood at the podium, Halafera beside him, their hands clasped together. I've called you here today to address the rumors circulating about Ms. Chen and myself. Yes, Halafera works as my personal assistant. Yes, we've spent considerable time together over the past months. And yes, I've fallen in love with her. The cameras flashed wildly. Reporters shouted questions. Julian raised his hand for silence. When Halafera first came to work for me, I treated her terribly. I was suspicious, cruel, and completely unfair. I judged her based on my own past hurts rather than seeing her for who she actually is. A woman of extraordinary character who works tirelessly to support her younger brother's medical treatments. A woman who has never once asked me for anything beyond her earned salary. A woman who turned down expensive gifts because she values her integrity more than material gain. He turned to look at Halafera, his voice softening. She taught me that not everyone has hidden agendas. That trust is earned through consistent actions, not suspicious vigilance. That love requires vulnerability, not protection. The smear campaign against her is designed to hurt me, but all it's done is make me more certain that she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Halafera stepped forward, her voice clear despite her nervousness. I won't pretend this is a normal situation. I'm very aware of the differences in our circumstances, but I didn't pursue Mr. Hawthorne. I didn't scheme or manipulate. I simply did my job to the best of my ability, and somewhere along the way, we discovered we cared about each other. If that makes me a gold digger in your eyes, then your definition needs examining. Theodore Blackwell, watching from the audience, smiled broadly. Mrs. Patterson, seated beside him, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The questions came rapid fire after that. Some supportive, others skeptical. But Julian and Halafera answered them together, their united front making it clear this wasn't a scandal. It was a love story. Vincent Carver's plan backfired spectacularly. Public opinion, which had been turning against Halafera, swung dramatically in her favor. People were moved by her story, by Timothy's illness, by Julian's honest admission of his own faults. The narrative shifted from gold digger seduces billionaire to cynical billionaire learns to love again. 3 months later, Timothy's treatments showed remarkable improvement. Julian had quietly connected them with the best specialists and covered the costs, though he swore Holofera to secrecy. "It's not charity," he insisted. "It's family taking care of family." Holofera returned to her art studies part-time. With Julian's encouragement and financial support that she accepted only after he structured it as an investment in a future artist. Her first gallery showing featured portraits of the people who mattered most. Timothy, laughing despite his illness. Mrs. Patterson in her kitchen, Julian with his walls finally down. On the night of her gallery opening, Julian pulled her aside into a quiet corner. "I have something for you," he said. Producing a small box, Holofera's heart hammered. "Julian, if that's what I think it is, it's not. Not yet." "Open it." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with a simple phrase, "Walls can fall." It's to remind us both that the barriers we build to protect ourselves often just keep us prisoners. "You freed me from mine, Holofera. You showed me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's courage." She clasped the bracelet around her wrist, blinking back tears. "You freed me too. From the belief that I had to do everything alone, that asking for help was failure, that people like you and I couldn't possibly understand each other. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two broken people who somehow made each other whole." "Not broken," she corrected. "Just human. Complicated, flawed, scared, but trying." He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her lips. "I love you, Holofera Chen. Not despite your circumstances, but because of how you've faced them. Not despite our differences, but because of how you've taught me to see beyond them. I love you too, Julian Hawthorne. Even when you're stubborn and arrogant and frustratingly overprotective, especially then. Especially then." Across the gallery, Timothy chatted excitedly with art critics about his sister's work. Mrs. Patterson showed Theodore photos on her phone, both of them beaming with pride. Vincent Carver had quietly retreated after his plan collapsed. His reputation damaged far more than Julian's had ever been. The story of the billionaire and his assistant became legend in their circles. But not for the reasons the gossip sites had hoped. It became a reminder that first impressions can be wrong, that people can change, and that love sometimes blooms in the most unexpected places years later. When their children asked how they met, Julian and Holofera would share the whole story. The good and the bad, the cruelty and the redemption. Because they both understood that the beauty of their relationship wasn't that it had been easy, but that they'd chosen each other despite everything. "You're nothing but a gold digger," Julian had once said. His words dripping with contempt, but a midnight confession changed everything, revealing that sometimes the person we judge most harshly is exactly the person we need most. And sometimes, admitting we were wrong is the first step toward becoming right in the end. Julian's walls didn't just fall, they transformed into bridges. And Holofera's quiet strength didn't just endure, it flourished. Together, they built something neither could have achieved alone. A love based not on perfection, but on honest, vulnerable, courageous authenticity. The midnight confession hadn't just changed Julian's opinion of Holofera. It had changed his understanding of himself, of what mattered, of what it meant to truly see another person. And in being seen, in being known, despite all his flaws and fears, he finally found the peace that had eluded him for so long. "I was wrong about you," he whispered to her on their wedding night. 2 years after that first terrible day in his office. "I know," she whispered back, smiling. "But you figured it out eventually. That's what matters." And it was. This story explores themes of prejudice, redemption, and the courage it takes to admit when we're wrong. Julian's journey from cynical billionaire to vulnerable partner mirrors. Holofera's journey from defensive survivor to trusting lover. Both had to overcome their fears, their past hurts, and their own preconceptions to find each other. The midnight confession wasn't just Julian admitting his feelings. It was him confessing his failures, his wounds, and his desire to be better. True change requires acknowledging past mistakes. And true love requires accepting someone's whole story, including the chapters that aren't pretty.
In the shimmering heart of San Francisco, where skyscrapers kissed the foggy sky, William Royce lived a life most could only dream of. A tech visionary in his late 30s, William was the man behind Royce Innovations, a groundbreaking company that had revolutionized artificial intelligence. To the world, he was a symbol of success, brilliant, driven, and untouchable. But beneath the polished surface of his life lay an emptiness he could no longer ignore. Just days away from his grand wedding to Isabella Hart, a supermodel and media darling, William believed he had finally found the missing piece of his perfect life. Isabella was everything society deemed enviable, stunning, poised, and adored by millions. Yet William's heart longed for something deeper, though he couldn't quite define what it was. The story takes a sharp turn one fateful evening, when William's world crumbles in a way he never anticipated. While driving past a luxury hotel, his eyes lock onto a sight that sends a cold shiver down his spine. Isabella, his fiancée, passionately embracing another man. The betrayal cuts him deeply, unraveling the carefully constructed narrative of his seemingly ideal life. As the sun sets over the bay, William stands at a crossroads. He is no longer the calm, calculated innovator the world admires. Instead, he is a man consumed by hurt and anger, silently vowing to turn the pain into a cold, calculated revenge. The city lights blurred as William Royce sat frozen in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Outside the grand facade of a luxury hotel, the scene before him played out like a cruel twist in one of the dramas Isabella adored. She was there, draped in a crimson evening gown that accentuated her ethereal beauty, her every movement exuding the grace of someone who had always been admired. But tonight, her elegance was shared with someone else. A tall, impeccably dressed man who held her in an embrace far too intimate to be mistaken. William's chest tightened as he watched the man lean in, his lips meeting Isabella's with a tenderness that should have been reserved for him. The weight of the betrayal hit like a punch to the gut, shattering William's carefully curated sense of control. He had worked tirelessly for decades, building a tech empire that defined progress, influence, and power. Yet, in this moment, none of it mattered. The woman he trusted, the one he was days away from marrying, had desecrated the sanctuary of their relationship. Inside the car, William's mind raced, shifting between disbelief and searing anger. How could she, he thought, his breathing shallow as the scene replayed in his mind. He had given her everything, his time, his devotion, and a place in his meticulously crafted world. Now, all he felt was a gnawing emptiness. As the couple disappeared into the hotel, William finally exhaled, his breath shaky and his pulse pounding. He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly, forcing himself to think. His jaw clenched as he made a silent vow. If you think you can humiliate me, Isabella, you're mistaken. This isn't over. When William drove away from the hotel, his thoughts were no longer plagued by sorrow, but fueled by a cold determination. Beneath the glittering skyline of San Francisco, he began to plot a revenge that would strike at the very core of her pride. The soft chime of a bell echoed through the cozy coffee shop as Emma Clark wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, blending with the faint hum of conversation from the few customers scattered around. Emma, a barista in her late 20s, carried herself with quiet poise. Her wavy brown hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her hazel eyes sparkled with warmth despite the long hours she worked each day. Emma's life was far from glamorous. After her parents passed away, she inherited their small home and a mountain of debt. She had spent years juggling multiple jobs to keep her head above water, but she never let her hardships dampen her spirit. Her modest dreams of stability and a life filled with small joys were what kept her going. For William Royce, Emma was an unnoticed constant. He often stopped by the coffee shop for his usual black coffee, his presence marked by the sleek suit and air of authority that surrounded him. To her, he was just another customer, albeit one whose demeanor spoke of wealth and power. Today, however, William's visit was different. He lingered at the counter longer than usual, his sharp blue eyes studying Emma as though seeing her for the first time. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the subtle crease in his brow that hinted at something weighing on his mind. "Emma, isn't it?" William finally asked, his deep voice breaking the silence between them. "Yes, that's right," she replied with a polite smile, though her brow furrowed slightly in curiosity. William rarely spoke more than a few words during his visits. "I need your help," he said abruptly, his tone serious. The weight of his gaze made Emma pause, the cleaning cloth still in her hand. "My help?" she echoed, uncertain. "With what, exactly?" William hesitated for a moment, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I'd like you to join me for dinner tomorrow night. I'll explain everything then." Emma blinked, stunned. This wasn't just unexpected. It felt like the opening act of a story she couldn't yet comprehend. The next evening, Emma Clark stood in front of the mirror in her modest apartment, staring at her reflection with a mix of disbelief and nervousness. She had spent most of the day debating whether to go. The offer from William Royce, the enigmatic billionaire she barely knew, seemed almost surreal. Why would someone like him invite her, a coffee shop barista, to dinner? What could he possibly want? She had initially declined, but William's persistence had been as surprising as it was convincing. "I promise you won't regret it," he had said with a tone of finality, leaving her no room for further argument. Now, as the hour approached, her nerves were in overdrive. Wearing a simple black dress she had owned for years, Emma decided she would go, not out of curiosity, but to understand what this unusual request was truly about. When Emma arrived at the restaurant, it felt like stepping into another world. The rooftop venue, overlooking the sparkling San Francisco skyline, was a picture of luxury she had only ever seen in movies. The dim lighting, soft jazz music, and clinking glasses painted a scene far removed from her daily life. William was already there, seated at a table near the glass railing. He looked effortlessly commanding in a tailored navy suit, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on her. Rising to greet her, he gestured toward the seat opposite him. "You came," he said simply, a hint of approval in his tone. Emma sat down cautiously, her hands folding nervously in her lap. "I almost didn't. I'm still not sure why I'm here." William leaned back in his chair, studying her as though weighing how much to reveal. "Let's just say, I need someone different for tonight. Someone who isn't part of this world." His cryptic response only deepened Emma's curiosity, but before she could press further, a familiar voice broke through the ambiance. Well, William, who's this?" Emma turned to see a stunning blonde woman approaching the table, her designer dress and air of confidence unmistakable. Isabella Hart. Emma's presence had not gone unnoticed, and the confrontation that followed would change the course of the evening. The air at the rooftop restaurant seemed to grow heavier as Isabella Hart, William's ex-fiancée, approached their table. Her every step was deliberate, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor with an authority that turned heads. Draped in an emerald gown that shimmered under the soft lights, she exuded an aura of untouchable elegance. But her piercing gaze was fixed squarely on Emma, her expression a mix of curiosity and disdain. "William," Isabella purred, her voice smooth but laced with an edge. "I didn't realize you'd moved on so quickly. And, with someone so unique." Her eyes swept over Emma, taking in her simple black dress and modest demeanor. Emma's cheeks flushed, but she held her head high. Despite her unease, she refused to shrink under Isabella's gaze. William, however, remained calm, his lips curving into a faint, deliberate smile. "Isabella," he greeted smoothly, rising from his seat. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Clearly," Isabella replied, her tone sharp. "I thought we'd agreed to keep things civilized." William's expression didn't falter. "This is Emma Clark," he said, gesturing toward her. "She's my date tonight." Emma blinked in surprise at his words, her mind racing. Date? That hadn't been part of their brief conversation earlier. She looked up at William, but his composed expression gave nothing away. Isabella's laugh was a melodic but cold sound. "Your date? Really, William? Is this some kind of joke?" William's gaze hardened, the smile fading from his lips. "Not at all. Emma is here because I wanted her to be. And frankly, she's a refreshing change from the superficiality I've grown accustomed to." The words cut through the tension like a blade, and for a moment, Isabella looked genuinely taken aback. But she quickly recovered, her mask of confidence slipping back into place. Emma, meanwhile, struggled to process the situation. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or humiliated, but she couldn't remain silent any longer. Taking a deep breath, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not here to compete with anyone," Emma said, meeting Isabella's gaze directly. "And I'm certainly not here to be part of some game." The honesty in her words seemed to hang in the air, silencing the growing whispers around them. Even William glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his otherwise composed demeanor. Isabella's eyes narrowed, her polished smile tightening. "Well, William, I hope you know what you're doing." "We always do," he replied coolly, his eyes not leaving Isabella's. As Isabella turned and strode away, the tension around the table began to ease. But for Emma, the night had only just begun. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been drawn into something far bigger than herself. The night grew quieter as Isabella disappeared into the crowd, leaving William and Emma alone at their table. Emma felt a storm of emotions churning inside her: confusion, unease, and a flicker of defiance. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to leave without getting them. Emma leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but tinged with irritation. "I'm not sure what kind of game you're playing, William, but I didn't agree to this. What's going on?" William regarded her with an almost amused expression, his sharp blue eyes scanning her face as if weighing how much truth to reveal. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Emma, I brought you here because I needed someone to remind me of what's real. This world, with its facades and games, has taken a toll on me. You're different, genuine, and unafraid to speak the truth." Her brow furrowed. "And what does that have to do with me sitting here, being paraded in front of your ex-fiancé?" A flicker of something softer passed through William's gaze, though his tone remained composed. "Isabella hurt me. She betrayed me, and she'll never admit she was wrong. I wanted to show her that I don't need her, that there are people like you who have more authenticity in one moment than she's shown in years." Emma stared at him, her frustration mounting. "So, you're using me to prove a point? To make her jealous?" William's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Emma shook her head, her voice laced with disappointment. "You're just as superficial as the world you're trying to escape from, William. If you wanted revenge, you could have chosen someone else. I won't be a pawn in your personal drama." She rose from her seat, her resolve clear. But as she turned to leave, William's voice stopped her. "Wait." There was a note of vulnerability in his tone that made her pause. "Emma," he said, softer now. "You're right. I've been selfish. But you've shown me something tonight. Something I didn't expect. You have strength, honesty, and a kind of grace I've never seen before. You're not just part of my plan anymore." Emma hesitated, turning back to face him. His words caught her off guard, but she remained skeptical. "And what exactly do you expect from me, William?" He stood slowly, his towering figure imposing but not threatening. "I need your help. Marry me, not for love, not forever, but for 7 days. In those 7 days, you can walk away whenever you want, but I need to show Isabella, and maybe even myself, that I can move forward." Emma's heart raced at the absurdity of the request. 7 days? And then what? "Then you're free," William replied, his voice steady. "You keep being you, and I'll deal with the fallout. No strings attached." Emma crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "Why should I trust you?" "Because," William said, a rare sincerity in his tone, "you're the first person in a long time who's made me want to trust anyone." The church was bathed in soft light as guests filled the pews, their whispers echoing beneath the soaring arches. White roses adorned every corner, their delicate fragrance mingling with the weight of anticipation in the air. At the altar, William Royce stood tall in a perfectly tailored black suit, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. His sharp gaze was fixed forward, though a subtle tension betrayed the inner conflict he couldn't shake. Emma Clark, clad in a simple yet elegant white gown, stood at the far end of the aisle. Her steps were measured, her breath steady, though her heart raced with every beat. Her dress wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. It highlighted her natural beauty, the kind of quiet charm that required no embellishment. As she approached the altar, she caught William's eye, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed to fall away. The priest's solemn voice began the ceremony, the words blurring in William's mind as he fought to keep his composure. Then, just as the priest asked, "If anyone has reason to object to this union, speak now, or forever hold your peace," the grand doors of the church swung open with a resounding crash. All heads turned as Isabella Hart stormed into the sanctuary. She was breathtaking in a flowing designer gown, her heels clicking like thunder against the polished floor. Her flawless exterior belied the storm of emotions in her eyes. "William," she called out, her voice trembling but defiant. "Stop this wedding. This isn't right." Emma froze, her hands tightening around the bouquet. William turned slowly, his expression unreadable as Isabella marched toward him. "William," Isabella pleaded, her voice breaking, "I made a mistake. I was foolish, but I love you. Don't throw away what we had." The room was silent, save for the quiet gasps of the guests. Emma's steady gaze met William's, a silent invitation for him to make his choice. She stepped back slightly, her composure unwavering. "William," Emma said softly, her voice steady and calm, "this is your choice. Don't let anger cloud it, and don't let pride guide it. Choose what feels true to you." William looked between the two women, his mind a whirlwind. Isabella, with her fiery beauty and commanding presence, represented the life he thought he wanted. But Emma, with her quiet strength and unshakable authenticity, had shown him something deeper. Taking a deep breath, he turned to Isabella. "What we had was beautiful," he said, his voice firm but laced with sadness. "But it wasn't built on trust or truth. Emma, she's shown me what those things look like." Isabella's eyes filled with tears as William turned back to Emma. His decision was clear. "Father," William said, his voice resolute, "please continue with the ceremony." The priest nodded, and as the vows were exchanged, the tension in the room dissolved. When the time came, William leaned forward, his kiss filled not with vengeance, but with gratitude and the promise of a new beginning. The warm glow of the evening sun filtered through the windows of William Royce's grand mansion as he carried Emma across the threshold. Her soft laughter filled the air as her wedding gown trailed gracefully behind them, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions that had brought them here. "You didn't have to carry me," Emma teased, her cheeks flushed. "This wasn't in the contract." William smirked, setting her gently on her feet. "True," he replied, his tone light but tinged with something deeper. "But there's something about tradition I'm starting to appreciate." Emma stepped back, her expression shifting to one of quiet seriousness. "William," she began, her voice steady, "I agreed to this marriage under certain conditions, but there's something you need to know before we go any further." William's brow furrowed, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked, stepping closer. Emma drew in a deep breath, her hands clasping together as she gathered her courage. "I'm not here to play a role in anyone's revenge," she said firmly, "and I'm not here to save you. This may have started as a contract, but if we're going to move forward, It has to be real. For both of us. William looked at her for a long moment, his sharp gaze softening. I thought I brought you into this for one reason, he admitted. But now I realize you've given me something I didn't know I needed. A chance to start again. Emma's lips curved into a small smile. And what does starting again look like for you? Like this, William said simply, taking her hand. No contracts, no schemes, just you and me, figuring it out together. That night, the mansion wasn't filled with grand celebrations or extravagant displays. Instead, it was quiet, intimate. A beginning built on something neither of them had expected to find. Trust.
Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories today. I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story, asterisk. Julian Ashford adjusted his tie for the third time as he waited in the private dining room of the Meridian, one of Chicago's most prestigious restaurants. At 32, he had built Ashford Technologies from a college dorm room idea into an $80 million empire. He had addressed conferences, negotiated with Fortune 500 companies, and revolutionized cybersecurity protocols used by governments worldwide. But sitting here waiting for a woman he had never met, he felt like a nervous teenager. His business partner, Grant Morrison, had insisted on arranging this date. Veronica Hayes is perfect for you, Grant had said repeatedly. Harvard Law, partner at her firm by 30. Brilliant mind. She is exactly the kind of woman you need. What Grant meant, Julian knew, was that Veronica was the kind of woman who might overlook the wheelchair. The thought made Julian's jaw tighten. He'd been paralyzed from the waist down for 7 years now, since a diving accident during a vacation in Costa Rica had changed everything. He had learned to navigate his new reality, to build a life that was full and meaningful, despite the limitations. But dating remained complicated in ways that had nothing to do with accessibility. The door opened, and Julian straightened instinctively. Veronica Hayes walked in, and he could see immediately why Grant had been so enthusiastic. She was striking, with sharp features, perfectly styled auburn hair, and a charcoal designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her confidence filled the room as she scanned the space with calculating eyes. Then those eyes landed on his wheelchair, and Julian saw the exact moment everything changed. Her professional smile froze. Her steps faltered. The warmth drained from her expression, replaced by something between shock and poorly concealed disgust. Julian, she asked, her voice climbing half an octave. That is me, Julian replied, extending his hand with practiced ease. Veronica, I presume? It is a pleasure to meet you. She stared at his hand for a long, uncomfortable moment before giving it the briefest possible shake, as if afraid prolonged contact might somehow transfer his condition to her. She sat down across from him, but Julian noticed how she positioned her chair slightly farther from the table than necessary. Maintaining maximum distance? Grant didn't mention that. Veronica began, gesturing vaguely toward his wheelchair. Use a wheelchair? Julian finished for her, keeping his tone neutral. No, he probably thought it would not matter. Apparently, he was optimistic. It is just surprising, Veronica said quickly, too quickly. That is all. The waiter arrived to take their orders, providing a brief respite from the tension. Julian ordered the restaurant's signature salmon. Veronica requested a salad, her voice clipped and distracted. As soon as the waiter left, the awkward silence returned. Heavier than before, Julian tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her work at the law firm. Her recent cases, her interests outside the office. Veronica answered in monosyllables, checking her phone constantly, her body language screaming her desire to be anywhere else. Every question Julian asked was met with minimal response. Every attempt at humor fell flat. 20 excruciating minutes passed. Then Veronica set down her water glass with more force than necessary and leaned forward. Look, she said, her voice low, but not quite low enough. I appreciate that Grant thought this was a good idea, but let us be honest here. I have a certain image to maintain. I attend galas, charity functions, corporate events. I need a partner who can stand beside me at those events. Someone who fits the lifestyle. Julian felt the familiar burn of humiliation in his chest, but he kept his expression carefully neutral. I see, and someone in a wheelchair does not fit that image. It is not personal, Veronica continued, as if that made it better. It is just practical. I mean, think about it. The logistics alone would be complicated, and people would stare. They would ask questions. I did not work this hard to build my reputation just to become known as the woman who dates the guy in the wheelchair. It would be a distraction from my career. Nearby tables had begun to notice the rising tension. Julian could feel eyes turning toward them, curiosity and pity in equal measure. He wanted to disappear, to wheel himself out of this restaurant and never look back. But pride kept him seated, kept his spine straight despite the crushing weight of her words.
Wait, so what you were saying?
Julian said quietly, is that my disability makes me unworthy of being seen with you in public. I am saying I have standards, Veronica replied, standing abruptly and gathering her designer purse. And I am sorry, but you do not meet them. I am sure there is someone out there who would be willing to take on a project like you, but I am not interested in being anyone's nurse or charity case. She said the last words loudly enough that several nearby diners openly turned to stare. Julian felt his face burning, humiliation washing over him in waves. He had experienced discrimination before, had dealt with thoughtless comments and architectural barriers and patronizing attitudes. But this public rejection, this casual cruelty delivered in a room full of witnesses, cut deeper than he wanted to admit. Veronica walked out without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Julian sat frozen at the table, acutely aware of every eye on him, every whispered comment. The waiter approached hesitantly, clearly unsure what to do. Sir, I am so sorry. Would you like me to cancel the orders? No, Julian said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. Just bring me the wine list. The expensive one. The waiter hurried away. Julian closed his eyes and tried to steady his breathing. This was why he avoided dating. This was why he threw himself into work, surrounded himself with the familiar safety of code and algorithms and business, deals that did not care about his physical limitations. Every time he tried to let someone in, every time he hoped things might be different, reality came crashing back with painful clarity. Excuse me, a soft voice said beside him. Julian opened his eyes to find a young woman standing next to his table. She wore the black and white uniform of the Meridian's waitstaff, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. But what struck him most were her eyes, deep brown and currently blazing with barely contained fury. Yes, Julian managed. I am Alina, she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. And I need you to know that woman who just left is the most horrible person I have ever seen walk through these doors. I have worked here for 3 years. So that is saying something. Julian blinked, surprised out of his misery. Thank you, but you do not have to. ... Yes, I do, Alina interrupted, glancing around quickly before pulling out the chair Veronica had vacated and sitting down. Because what just happened was wrong. Completely, absolutely wrong. And you deserve to know that not everyone in this world is blind, stupid, or soulless. I appreciate the sentiment, Julian said. But your manager is going to notice you sitting with a customer. Let him notice, Alina said with a fierce determination that made Julian's lips twitch despite everything. Some things are more important than following arbitrary rules. And right now, making sure you do not leave here thinking you deserve that treatment is more important than my job. You could really get fired for this, Julian warned. Then I will get fired for doing the right thing, Alina replied. Now, you ordered the salmon, correct? When it arrives, I am going to share this table with you and have a proper conversation, because that woman did not deserve even 1 minute of your time. And you deserve to finish your evening with someone who has the basic decency to see you as a human being. For the first time since Veronica had walked in, Julian felt something other than humiliation. He felt seen. Not pitied, not patronized, but genuinely seen by someone who had just put her livelihood on the line to defend a complete stranger. Why are you doing this? He asked softly. Elena's fierce expression softened into something gentler. Because my little sister Sophie has cerebral palsy. I have spent my entire life watching people treat her like she is less than human because of her physical challenges. And I will never, ever stand by and watch someone be dehumanized like that. Not on my watch. Not ever. Julian felt an unfamiliar tightness in his throat. Your sister is lucky to have you. I am lucky to have her, Alina corrected. She taught me what really matters in this world. And it is not designer clothes or corporate ladders or maintaining some perfect image. It is kindness, empathy, and having the courage to stand up for what is right. The manager of the Meridian approached their table, his expression stern. Miss Carter, what are you doing? Alina looked up at him without flinching. I am finishing a conversation, Mr. Peterson. I will be back to work in a moment. This is highly inappropriate, Mr. Peterson said. So is what happened here tonight, Alina replied firmly. And I chose to address that inappropriateness rather than ignore it. If that costs me my job, then so be it. Mr. Peterson looked between Alina and Julian, clearly torn between enforcing restaurant policy and avoiding a scene. Finally, he sighed. The gentleman has not complained. I will give you 10 minutes, Miss Carter. Then I expect you back at your station. As Mr. Peterson walked away, Alina turned back to Julian with a small smile. So, Julian, tell me about yourself. And I do not want to hear about your company or your business achievements. Tell me about you. What do you do when you are not building empires? What makes you laugh? What is your favorite, completely ridiculous, guilty pleasure? And despite everything, despite the humiliation still burning in his chest and the stares still coming from nearby tables, Julian found himself smiling. Because this strange, fierce young woman had just given him something he had not experienced in a very long time. She had given him hope. The 10 minutes Mr. Peterson had granted turned into 20, then 30. Julian found himself talking to Alina Carter in a way he had not talked to anyone in years. She asked him about his love for vintage jazz music, about the mystery novels he secretly devoured at 2 a.m, about his failed attempts at learning to play the saxophone. In return, she told him about her dreams of opening her own bistro, about her sister Sophie's infectious laugh, about how she had once accidentally set a kitchen on fire trying to make creme brulee when Alina finally had to return to work. Julian found himself reluctant to let the conversation end. He paid his bill and added a generous tip, but before leaving, he wrote his phone number on the back of his business card. If you would like to continue this conversation sometime, he said, handing it to her, I would really enjoy that. Maybe over coffee? Or dinner at a place where you do not have to work. Alina took the card, her smile genuine and warm. I would love that. How about Sunday? It is my day off. Sunday is perfect, Julian said, feeling lighter than he had in months. Over the following 3 weeks, Julian and Alina saw each other whenever their schedules allowed. Alina worked long hours at the Meridian, often pulling double shifts to help cover her sister's medical expenses and save toward her dream of culinary school. Julian's schedule was equally demanding, with Ashford Technologies in the middle of expanding into the European market. But they made time, stealing hours here and there. Building something neither had expected to find, Julian learned that Alina was 28, that she had been essentially raising Sophie since their mother died 5 years ago from cancer. Their father had left when Alina was 12, unable to handle the demands of caring for a child with cerebral palsy. Alina had worked multiple jobs since she was 16, putting herself through community college while caring for Sophie, who was now 23 and living in a supported living facility that Alina visited every day. She is the strongest person I know, Alina told him during a walk through Millennium Park. Julian navigating the paths easily in his chair while Alina walked beside him. People look at her and see limitations, but Sophie sees possibilities everywhere. She taught me that disabilities do not define people. Lack of compassion does. Julian, in turn, opened up about his own struggles in ways he rarely did with anyone. He told her about the depression that had consumed him after the accident, about the physical therapy that had been agonizing, about the moment he realized he could either let the wheelchair define him or he could define himself despite it. My family struggled with it, he admitted. They loved me, but they started treating me like I was fragile, like I might break. My mother especially. She became overprotective to the point of suffocation. My brother Preston took over parts of the company he thought I could not handle anymore. even though my mind works perfectly fine. It took me years to reclaim my authority, to make them see I was still capable. Are they better now? Alina asked. Julian's expression darkened. They are better at hiding their doubt, but it is still there. They still think I need managing, still think my personal life requires their intervention. He did not tell her that his family would likely disapprove of their relationship, though he suspected Alina knew. The differences in their backgrounds were obvious, impossible to ignore. Julian lived in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. Alina shared a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a working class neighborhood with a rotating cast of roommates to help split the rent. His world was corporate deals and investment portfolios. Hers was double shifts and carefully budgeted groceries. But when they were together, none of that seemed to matter. Their first official date was at Julian's penthouse. He had insisted on cooking for her, wanting to show her that he was capable and independent in his own space. Alina arrived wearing a simple navy dress, her usual ponytail replaced by loose waves, and Julian felt his breath catch. Welcome to my home, he said, gesturing around the open-plan space. Everything was designed for accessibility, but also for beauty. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of the city. Art pieces he had collected over the years adorned the walls. Bookshelves overflowed with volumes on everything from computer science to philosophy. Julian, this is beautiful, Alina said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. The kitchen is this way, he said, leading her through. I hope you are hungry. I am making risotto, and I will be offended if you do not eat at least 2 servings. Alina laughed, the sound filling his home with warmth. I would never insult a chef's risotto. That is a sacred rule. They cooked together, Julian handling the risotto while Alina prepared a salad and garlic bread. They moved around each other with surprising ease, falling into a natural rhythm. Julian told her about learning to cook after the accident, how it had become a form of therapy, a way to prove to himself that he could still create, still nurture, still provide. My mother wanted to hire a full-time chef for me, he said, stirring the rice slowly. She could not understand why I insisted on cooking for myself, but it mattered. It still matters. This is my space, my domain, where I am completely in control. I understand that, Alina said softly. Food has always been my way of showing love. When Sophie was having a hard day, I would make her favorite cookies. When my mother was sick, I would cook elaborate meals just to see her smile. Cooking is not just sustenance. It is connection. Dinner was perfect. They ate at Julian's table overlooking the twinkling lights of Chicago, talking about everything and nothing. Julian felt something he had not felt in years. Completely comfortable, completely accepted, completely seen. After dinner, they moved to the couch. Julian poured wine, and they continued talking as the city lights sparkled below them. At some point, Alina's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. I need to tell you something, Julian said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I am falling for you, Alina, fast and hard, and in a way that terrifies me, because I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize this is too complicated, or I am too much work, or that being with me comes with challenges you did not sign up for. Alina shifted closer, her brown eyes intense. Julian Ashford, listen to me very carefully. You are not too much work. You are not a burden. You are brilliant and kind and funny and talented. Yes, you use a wheelchair. So what? That is just one aspect of who you are. It does not define you, and it certainly does not make me want you any less. And my family is going to be difficult, Julian warned. They have opinions about everything, including who I should date. And when they find out about us, then we will handle it, Alina said firmly. Together. I am not afraid of difficult families or complicated situations, Julian. I am only afraid of walking away from something real, because it might be hard. And this feels real to me. Does it feel real to you? More real than anything I have ever experienced, Julian admitted. Alina leaned in and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. So we are doing this? Alina asked. Officially? We are definitely doing this, Julian confirmed. You and me against whatever comes next. What came next arrived sooner than either of them expected. 2 days later, Julian received a call from Grant Morrison. "We need to talk," Grant said, his tone serious. "In person? Can you come to the office?" At Ashford Technologies headquarters, Grant was waiting in the conference room with Thomas Brennan, their lead investor and board member. "Julian, sit down," Thomas said, gesturing to a chair. "We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Julian asked, though dread was already pooling in his stomach. Grant cleared his throat uncomfortably. "There are photos circulating. You and Alina Carter at that restaurant at various places around Chicago, at your penthouse. Someone has been following you." "Following me?" Julian's voice hardened. "Why?" "Because Westbrook International wants to invest $100 million into Ashford Technologies," Thomas explained. "They are our ticket to massive expansion. But their CEO, Harold Westbrook, is old-fashioned about certain things. He believes company leaders should present a certain image, and he has expressed concerns about your relationship with a waitress." Julian felt fury building in his chest. "My personal life is not his concern." "It becomes his concern when it affects his investment," Grant said carefully. "Harold Westbrook comes from old money, old values. He is worried about optics, about how it looks for a CEO to be dating someone so far outside his social circle. He thinks it shows poor judgment." "Poor judgment?" Julian repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Dating a hard-working, compassionate woman who supports her disabled sister shows poor judgment?" "I am just telling you what he said," Grant replied. "He is willing to make the investment if you end the relationship. Otherwise, the deal is off." Thomas leaned forward. "Julian, this is $100 million. That is the kind of capital that could transform this company, that could secure everyone's future here. We are talking about hundreds of jobs, expansion into 6 new countries, partnerships that could make Ashford Technologies a global household name. And all I have to do is break up with Elena," Julian said flatly. "It is a business decision," Thomas said. "Not a personal one." Julian looked between the two men, these people he had worked with for years, and saw the expectation in their eyes. They genuinely believed he would choose the money. They thought this was an easy calculation. "No," Julian said simply. Grant blinked. "No, no," Julian repeated, more firmly. "I will not end my relationship with Alina for Harold Westbrook or his money or anyone else. If Westbrook cannot see past his outdated prejudices, then he is not someone I want as a partner anyway." "Julian, be reasonable," Thomas started. "I am being reasonable," Julian interrupted. "I am being reasonable about what actually matters in life. Alina showed me kindness when I was at my lowest. She sees me as a complete person, not as a disability or a bank account. She challenges me, inspires me, makes me want to be better. And you are asking me to throw that away for money? No, absolutely not." "This is $100 million, Grant said, as if Julian had not understood the amount. "I heard you the first time," Julian replied, "and my answer is still no. Tell Westbrook his investment is not welcome. I will find other investors, people who care more about innovation than social climbing, people who understand that a CEO's worth is not measured by who he dates." Thomas stood abruptly. "You are making a mistake." "Then it is my mistake to make," Julian said. "This is my company, built on my ideas, my work, my vision. And I am not going to compromise my values or my happiness for anyone's investment. If that costs me business partners, so be it." After they left, Julian sat alone in the conference room, his hands shaking slightly. He had just walked away from a fortune, potentially damaged his company's growth trajectory, all for a relationship that was barely a month old. Some would call that foolish. But as he pulled out his phone and called Alina, hearing her voice wash over him like a bomb, Julian knew he had made the right choice. Because money could be earned and lost and earned again. But finding someone who saw your worth, who valued you for who you truly were, that was priceless. "Alina," he said when she answered, "are you free tonight?" "I need to see you." "I have something important to tell you. Is everything okay?" she asked, concern in her voice. Everything is perfect, Julian said, surprising himself with the truth of it. I just realized what really matters, and I want to share that with you. That evening, Julian told Alina everything. About the investment offer, about Westbrook's conditions, about his decision to walk away. He expected her to be upset, maybe even angry that he had risked so much for their relationship. Instead, Alina burst into tears. "You chose me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You chose us over $100 million. I would choose you over any amount of money," Julian said, pulling her close. "Because you are worth more than any investment, any business deal, any expansion plan. You are real, Alina. What we have is real, and I am not going to let anyone take that away from us." Alina kissed him then, deep and passionate, pouring everything she felt into that moment. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. "I love you," Alina said. "I know it is fast. I know it is crazy. But I love you, Julian Ashford." "I love you too," Julian replied, the words coming easily, naturally. More than I thought possible, they held each other as the city lights glowed around them, as people from different worlds who had found something precious together. They both knew challenges lay ahead. Julian's family still did not know about their relationship. Elena's demanding work schedule and family responsibilities would continue to complicate things. The business world would keep judging, keep questioning, keep waiting for them to fail. But in that moment, none of it mattered. They had each other, and they had love. And that was enough to face whatever came next. The fallout from Julian's decision came swiftly. Within days, his mother Catherine requested an urgent family meeting at the Ashford estate. Julian knew what was coming, but he went anyway, with Alina by his side. He had asked her to come, wanting his family to meet the woman he loved, hoping they might see what he saw in her. The Ashford estate was intimidating. A sprawling mansion in the suburbs with manicured gardens and architecture that screamed old money. Elena's hand tightened on Julian's as they approached the front door. "You do not have to do this," Julian murmured. "I can handle them alone." "We are in this together," Elena reminded him. "Remember?" Inside, the entire Ashford family was assembled. Catherine sat in her usual high-back chair like a queen holding court. Julian's father, Richard Ashford, stood by the fireplace, his expression unreadable. His brother Preston lounged on the sofa looking smug. "Julian," Catherine said coldly, her eyes sliding over Alina with barely concealed disdain. "You brought a guest." "This is Alina Carter," Julian said firmly. "The woman I love. Alina, these are my parents, Catherine and Richard, and my brother Preston." "It is nice to meet you," Alina said politely. Though Julian could hear the slight tremor in her voice, Catherine did not offer her hand. "Miss Carter, I understand you work at the Meridian." "I do," Alina confirmed, lifting her chin. "I am a server there while I save money for culinary school." "How industrious," Catherine said, in a tone that suggested the opposite. "Julian, might I speak with you privately?" "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Alina," Julian replied. Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well. We heard about the Westbrook deal. You turned down $100 million for this relationship." "I did," Julian confirmed. "Have you lost your mind?" Preston interjected. "Do you know what that investment could have done for the company? For all of us." "I know exactly what it would have done," Julian said calmly. "It would have made us richer. It also would have required me to end my relationship with the woman I love. I was not willing to do that, because she has gotten her hooks into you," Preston sneered. "Come on, Julian. A waitress and a millionaire? It is obvious what she wants." Alina stiffened beside Julian, but before she could respond, Julian's voice cut through the room like ice. "Finish that thought, Preston. And you and I are done. Permanently." The threat in Julian's voice was unmistakable. Preston actually flinched. "We are just concerned," Catherine said, though her tone remained cold. "You have been through so much since the accident. You are vulnerable, Julian. And people take advantage of vulnerable, wealthy men all the time." "I am not vulnerable," Julian said firmly. "I am capable of making my own decisions. And I chose Alina because she is kind, intelligent, hardworking, and treats me like a complete person. not like a disability in a wheelchair. If she truly cared about you, Catherine said, turning to Alina directly, she would understand that your future is more important than her feelings. A woman who loved you would want what is best for you, which includes financial security and appropriate social connections. Alina had been silent up to this point, but now she spoke, her voice steady, despite the obvious hostility in the room. Mrs. Ashford, with all due respect, you do not get to define what love means. I did not ask Julian to turn down that investment. When he told me about it, I told him I would understand if he needed to prioritize his business. He made that choice himself because he believes some things are more important than money. And if you cannot see that, if you truly think your son's worth is measured only by his bank account and social status, then you do not know him at all. The room fell silent. Catherine's face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to me that way in my own home? Catherine hissed. I am speaking the truth, Alina continued, her voice gaining strength. Your son is brilliant, compassionate, and brave. He has built an incredible company while dealing with challenges most people could not imagine. He deserves to be loved for who he is, not for what he can provide or what image he projects. And if you spent less time trying to control his life and more time actually seeing him, you might realize how extraordinary he truly is. Richard Ashford, who had been silent until now, spoke for the first time. Julian, is this truly what you want? This relationship, regardless of the consequences. Julian took Alina's hand and faced his father squarely. Yes, Alina is what I want. A future with her is what I want. And if that means losing business deals or disappointing this family, then so be it. Because for the first time in 7 years, I feel complete. I feel seen and valued for who I am, not pitied or managed or treated like I am broken. Alina did that. She gave me that gift, and I am not walking away from it for anything. Then you will marry her, Richard said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at him. Even Catherine looked shocked. What? Preston sputtered. If Julian loves this woman enough to sacrifice business opportunities, enough to defy this family, then he should marry her, Richard continued. Make it official. Show us all this is real and not just rebellion against our expectations. Julian looked at Alina, whose eyes had gone wide. This was not how he had planned to propose, not even close. But as he looked at her, saw the love and support shining in her eyes, despite the hostility surrounding them. He knew his father was right. He maneuvered his wheelchair to face Alina directly. Taking both her hands in his, Alina Carter, he said, his voice filled with emotion. This is not the romantic proposal you deserve. There are no candles or rose petals or carefully planned speeches, but the truth is simple. I love you. I love your strength, your compassion, your fierce loyalty to the people you care about. I love how you see the best in people, how you fight for what is right, how you make me want to be better. You changed my life the moment you sat down at my table and refused to let me believe I deserved that humiliation. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that you made the right choice. Will you marry me? Tears were streaming down Alina's face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Julian. 1,000 times yes. They kissed. Right there in the Ashford family living room, ignoring the shocked silence around them. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. Catherine stood abruptly and left the room without a word. Preston followed her, shaking his head in disgust. But Richard remained, studying them both with an expression that was difficult to read. Alina, Richard said finally, you defended my son with passion and spoke truth that was difficult to hear. I do not approve of how quickly this has happened. I do not understand it. But I can see Julian is happy in a way I have not seen since before the accident. So you have my cautious blessing. Do not make me regret it. I will spend every day proving I am worthy of him, Alina promised. See that you do, Richard replied. Then, surprisingly, he approached Julian and placed a hand on his shoulder. You are braver than I gave you credit for, son. Your mother will come around eventually. She always does. And if she does not, well, it is your life to live. After Richard left, Julian and Alina sat together in the empty living room, processing what had just happened. Did we really just get engaged in the middle of a family confrontation? Alina asked with a slightly hysterical laugh. We absolutely did, Julian confirmed. And I do not regret a single second of it. Though I promise to give you a proper proposal later, with a ring and romance and everything you deserve. I do not need anything fancy, Alina said, curling against his side. I just need you. Over the following weeks, their lives transformed. Alina gave notice at the Meridian. And with a proper business loan from Julian's company, with interest rates and a formal contract that she insisted upon, she enrolled in culinary school while beginning plans for her bistro. Julian found new investors who cared more about innovation than social politics. People who appreciated that a CEO with strong personal values was an asset, not a liability. Sophie adored Julian from their first meeting. The young woman with cerebral palsy saw past his wheelchair instantly, engaging him in enthusiastic discussions about her favorite television shows and asking his opinion on everything from music to art. Watching Julian with Sophie, seeing the patience and genuine interest he showed, Alina fell even more deeply in love with him. Julian's relationship with his family improved slowly. Richard began having weekly lunches with Julian and Alina, getting to know her beyond his initial prejudices. He was impressed by her business plan for the bistro, offering advice from his own business experience. Preston remained distant and disapproving, but his opinion mattered less as time went on. Catherine was the holdout. For months, she refused to acknowledge the engagement, would not speak to Alina, and made her disapproval known at every opportunity. But Julian held firm, making it clear that Alina was now a permanent part of his life, and Catherine could either accept it or miss out on his life entirely. 6 months after the proposal, Julian and Alina stood in front of a historic but abandoned building in downtown Chicago. It was 4 stories of beautiful architecture that had been left to decay, with high ceilings, original woodwork, and enormous potential. What do you think? Julian asked Alina. I think it is beautiful and probably way beyond what we can afford, Alina replied practically. What if I told you I already bought it? Julian said with a grin. In both our names, equal ownership. Lena's eyes went wide. Julian, you did not. I have a vision. The ground floor becomes Sophie's kitchen, your bistro. But the upper floors become something bigger. A community center focused on helping people with disabilities find employment, develop skills, build careers. We create programs for job training, for advocacy, for connection. We build something that changes lives. Alina stared at the building, then at Julian, tears filling her eyes. You want to name my bistro after Sophie? She is part of why we met, Julian said simply. She taught you to see people's worth beyond their physical limitations. That lesson brought you into my life. It seems only fitting to honor her. Lena threw her arms around him, overcome with emotion. I love you so much. I love you too, Julian murmured against her hair. Now, there is one more thing. He pulled away from her and, with careful movements, transferred from his wheelchair to kneel on the ground. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. I promised you a proper proposal, he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning but elegant diamond ring. Alina Carter, you walked into my life on one of my worst days and transformed everything. You saw past my wheelchair to the man underneath. You fought for me when I could not fight for myself. You loved me without conditions or expectations. You made me believe in fairy tales again. Will you marry me? Properly this time, with a ring and romance and all the words I want to say. Yes, Alina sobbed, laughing through tears. Yes, of course, yes. Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, and she helped him back into his chair before kissing him deeply. They held each other in front of their building, the place that would become their legacy. Their contribution to making the world better. The wedding took place 8 months later in the garden of a small venue overlooking Lake Michigan. It was intimate, only close friends and family. Sophie was Alina's maid of honor, radiant in her joy. Richard walked Alina down the aisle after her own father remained absent. The older man, having gradually come to respect and even admire her strength, Catherine attended, sitting stiffly in the front row. But when Julian and Alina exchanged vows, Speaking of love, that sees beyond limitations and chooses compassion over judgment, Catherine quietly wiped away tears. After the ceremony, she approached Alina. "You make my son happy," Catherine said simply. "I was wrong to oppose this. I thought I was protecting him, but I was only limiting him. Thank you for seeing what I could not." "Thank you for coming," Alina replied graciously. Offering her mother-in-law an olive branch they both knew represented a new beginning. The reception was filled with laughter and dancing. Julian had worked with the venue to ensure everything was accessible, and he danced with Alina, despite his wheelchair. The two of them moving together in perfect harmony, while their loved ones celebrated around them. Sophie gave a toast that left everyone in tears, speaking about how Alina had always been her hero and now Julian was too, because they showed her that love was about seeing people's hearts, not their bodies. 3 years later, Julian and Alina stood in the fully renovated building that had become the heart of their shared mission. The ground floor bistro, Sophie's Kitchen, was thriving. Known throughout Chicago for its innovative menu and warm atmosphere, more importantly, it employed several people with disabilities, offering them fair wages and opportunities they struggled to find. Elsewhere, the upper floors housed the Ashford Carter Foundation, a nonprofit that had helped hundreds of people with disabilities find meaningful employment. They offered job training, resume workshops, interview preparation, and connections with employers who valued ability over appearance. The foundation also ran support groups, advocacy programs, and had become a respected voice in disability rights. Elena's culinary school degree hung on the wall of the bistro. Next to photos of her staff and family, Julian split his time between Ashford Technologies, which had grown successfully without Westbrook's investment, and the foundation work that had become his true passion. Sophie worked part-time at the bistro, greeting customers with her infectious smile. Proving every day that disability did not mean inability, she had become the unofficial mascot of their mission, her joy and determination inspiring everyone who met her. One evening, as they closed the bistro together, Alina found Julian sitting in the empty dining room, looking around with a contented expression. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sliding into his lap and wrapping her arms around his neck. "I am thinking about that night," Julian said. "When Veronica walked out and I sat there feeling worthless, I am thinking about how you appeared like some avenging angel and refused to let me believe I deserved that treatment. I am thinking about how one moment of courage from you changed absolutely everything. I am thinking about how one moment of seeing someone's true worth changed my life too," Alina replied. "You taught me that love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about finding someone perfect for you. Are you happy?" Julian asked, needing to hear the answer. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Alina said honestly. "We built something beautiful, Julian. Not just this place, not just our businesses. We built a life that matters, a life that helps people, a life filled with real love. That is more than most people ever get." Julian kissed her softly. "I love you, Alina Ashford." "I love you too," she whispered back. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered with possibility. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds held each other close, grateful for every challenge they had overcome, every barrier they had broken, every person who had doubted them and been proven wrong, because they had learned the most important truth of all, that real love sees beyond appearances, beyond social status, beyond physical limitations. Real love sees the heart, values the soul, and chooses connection over convention every single time. And that kind of love, they had proven, could change everything. Thank you for taking Thed time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories. The Carter estate blazed with lights that Tuesday evening, every window glowing like a beacon of wealth and excess. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting rainbow prisms across the marble floors, where guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled with champagne flutes in hand. The air hummed with orchestral music and the buzz of high society conversation. Everyone gathered to celebrate the engagement of Vanessa Carter, 2, Thomas Worthington, 3. Heir to a pharmaceutical empire, Jessica Carter stood near the back terrace, doors wearing a simple navy dress that her mother had dismissed as dull that morning. She held a glass of sparkling water, not champagne, because even that small indulgence felt like asking for too much. At 26, she had learned to make herself small, to occupy as little space as possible in a family that had never wanted her to take up any room at all. Across the ballroom, Vanessa held court like a queen, her diamond ring catching the light with every gesture. She was everything Jessica was not: confident, polished, beloved. Their mother Eleanor stood beside her, one manicured hand resting possessively on Vanessa's shoulder, beaming with pride. Their father Richard worked the room with his usual commanding presence, shaking hands and accepting congratulations as if he himself were getting married. Jessica took a sip of her water and tried to ignore the familiar ache in her chest. She had long ago accepted her role as the forgotten daughter, the one who hadn't quite measured up. While Vanessa had excelled at everything from academics to social graces, Jessica had simply existed in the background, never quite good enough to earn their parents' approval. A waiter passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and Jessica reached for one, but her mother's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Jessica, really, must you hover near the food like that? People will think we don't feed you." Heat flooded Jessica's face as several nearby guests turned to look. She pulled her hand back, the waiter moving awkwardly away. Eleanor glided over, her smile tight and cold. "Why don't you make yourself useful and check on the coat room? I'm sure someone needs to organize something back there." It was a dismissal, pure and simple. Jessica nodded mutely and turned away, but not before catching the pitying glances from some of the guests. Pity was somehow worse than invisibility. She had just reached the hallway when Vanessa's voice rang out, amplified by the microphone someone had handed her. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Your love and support mean everything to Thomas and me." Vanessa paused, her eyes scanning the crowd with practiced charm. "I especially want to thank my incredible parents who taught me what true success looks like, and who never settled for anything less than excellence." The words were like barbs, each one designed to draw blood. Jessica knew because she had heard variations of this speech her entire life. It was the settling, the less than excellent, the disappointment her parents had learned to ignore. But then Vanessa continued, and Jessica froze in the hallway. "You know, growing up I always knew I wanted to be nothing like my sister. Jessica showed me exactly what not to do with your life. While she drifted through community college and dead-end jobs, I was building my future.
Oh.
So in a way I should thank her too. She was the perfect example of wasted potential." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that Jessica felt her lungs constrict, her vision narrowing to a tunnel. She heard her father's booming laugh, saw her mother's approving nod through the doorway. Something inside her shattered. She didn't remember grabbing her coat, didn't remember pushing through the front doors into the cold November night. One moment she was standing in that hallway, the next she was running down the long driveway, her heels clicking against the pavement, rain beginning to fall in cold, stinging drops. The tears came hot and fast, blurring her vision. Years of swallowed hurt poured out in wrenching sobs that tore from her throat. She ran until her legs ached, until the mansion was far behind her, until she found herself on a deserted street corner in an upscale neighborhood she barely recognized. The rain intensified, soaking through her thin coat, plastering her hair to her face. Jessica collapsed onto a bus stop bench, hugging herself as the cold seeped into her bones. She had no phone, she realized, had left it in her purse back at the house. Had left everything. She was utterly, completely alone. Headlights suddenly illuminated the rain, a sleek black car pulling up to the curb. Jessica tensed, instinct telling her to run, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out into the downpour. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive suit that the rain immediately began to ruin, but he didn't seem to care. He had dark hair, strong features, and eyes that fixed on Jessica with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Going to catch pneumonia out here," he said, his voice deep and steady. Jessica tried to speak, but only managed a choked sound. The man stepped closer, and she realized she recognized him. Ryan Blackwood. She had seen his face in business magazines, on billboards advertising his luxury hotel chain. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country, and he was standing in the rain, looking at her like she mattered. "I know who you are," he said quietly, pulling off his jacket and draping it around her shoulders. The warmth was immediate and overwhelming. "Jessica Carter. I've seen you at these society functions, always on the edges, always overlooked." "How do you?" she whispered. "I pay attention." His eyes never left hers. "I've watched your family treat you like you're invisible for 2 years now, and every time I've wanted to tell you that you're worth 100 of them." Jessica stared at him, unable to process the words. This had to be a dream, some kind of breakdown-induced hallucination. Ryan crouched down so they were eye level, rain streaming down his face. "Come with me. Right now. I have a car, a warm apartment, and a life where you'll never be invisible again." "I don't understand," Jessica managed. "Why would you? Because I see you," he interrupted, his voice fierce. "Because you deserve better than what they've given you. Because from this moment on, you're mine to protect, to care for, to show the world how extraordinary you really are." His hand extended toward her, steady and sure. "What do you say, Jessica? Will you let me prove to you what I already know?" The rain fell harder, washing away the tears, washing away the past. Jessica looked at his hand, then at his face, seeing something in his eyes she had never seen directed at her before. Absolute certainty. She placed her trembling hand in his. "Yes," she whispered. Ryan's fingers closed around hers, warm and protective, and he pulled her to her feet. As he guided her toward the waiting car, Jessica felt something shift inside her chest. Terror and hope tangled together. Forming something new and fragile, she didn't look back at the direction of the Carter state, she only looked forward. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a penthouse that took Jessica's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city's skyline, raindrops racing down the glass like diamonds. The interior was modern yet warm, all clean lines and comfortable furnishings in shades of cream and charcoal. It was nothing like the cold, ornate excess of the Carter mansion. This place felt lived in, real. Ryan guided her inside with a gentle hand on her back, and Jessica realized she was still shivering, her clothes dripping onto the hardwood floor. "The bathroom is through there," Ryan said, pointing to a hallway. "There are towels, robes, everything you need. Take your time. I'll make some tea." Jessica nodded mutely and walked in the direction he indicated, her wet shoes squeaking with each step. The bathroom was spa-like, all marble and soft lighting. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her makeup had run in dark streaks, her hair hung in wet tangles, and her eyes looked haunted. She stripped off the soaked clothing and stepped into the shower, letting hot water cascade over her until feeling returned to her numb limbs. The tears came again, quieter this time, mixing with the water and disappearing down the drain. She cried for the little girl who had tried so hard to earn love that would never come. She cried for all the years wasted hoping her family would see her. And finally, she cried in relief that maybe, just maybe, those years were over. When she emerged wrapped in a plush robe, her hair turbaned in a towel, Ryan was in the kitchen. He had changed into dark jeans and a fitted sweater, looking more human and somehow more intimidating without the formal suit. He poured steaming liquid into 2 mugs and gestured for her to sit on the oversized couch. Jessica curled into the corner, accepting the mug gratefully. The tea was chamomile with honey, soothing and sweet. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I still don't understand why you're doing this." Ryan settled into the chair across from her, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I told you, I've been watching you." Not in a creepy way, he added with a slight smile. "But I attend a lot of the same events as your family. Charity galas, business dinners, society functions, and I've seen how they treat you." Jessica looked down at her tea, shame heating her cheeks. "So you pity me?" "No." His voice was firm enough that her eyes snapped up to meet his. "I admire you. Do you have any idea how strong you have to be to endure what you've endured and still show up? Still try? Most people would have broken or become bitter. But you just kept going. I don't feel strong, Jessica whispered. I feel like a coward who should have left years ago. Ryan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Can I tell you something? 6 months ago, I was at the Metropolitan Art Gala. Your mother was holding court, talking about Vanessa's latest achievement. You were standing near a sculpture, completely absorbed in reading the placard. Some man bumped into you hard enough that you dropped your glass. It shattered everywhere. And you know what you did? Jessica shook her head, not remembering the incident at all. You apologized to him? Then you got down on your knees in your evening gown and started picking up the glass pieces yourself so no one else would get hurt. The staff tried to stop you, but you insisted on helping clean up. That's when I knew. Knew what? That you were special. That underneath all that conditioning your family subjected you to, there was someone extraordinary waiting to emerge. Ryan's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. I started paying more attention after that. I watched how you lit up when you thought no one was looking. How you were kind to staff members when your family was dismissive. How you had this quiet grace that had nothing to do with breeding or money. Jessica felt something crack open inside her chest. Something that had been sealed shut for so long she had forgotten it existed. Hope. I don't know how to be extraordinary, she admitted. I don't even know who I am outside of being the disappointment. Then let's find out together. Ryan stood and extended his hand again, just as he had in the rain. Stay here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest. But I promise you, Jessica, you will never be treated as less than again. Not while I'm around. She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. They stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Why does this feel like a fairy tale? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because maybe it is, he replied. But the best kind? The kind where the princess saves herself, and the prince just provides the transportation. Despite everything, Jessica laughed. It was a small, broken sound, but it was real. Ryan's answering smile transformed his face from handsome to devastating. There it is, he said softly. I was wondering what your real laugh sounded like. Morning arrived with pale sunlight streaming through the windows. Jessica woke in a guest bedroom so comfortable she had slept dreamlessly for the first time in months. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the previous night came rushing back. She had left. Actually left. And Ryan Blackwood, billionaire hotel magnate, had taken her in like she mattered. Panic seized her chest. What was she doing? She had no phone, no clothes, no plan. The Carter family would be furious. They would come looking for her. Not out of love, but because she had embarrassed them by disappearing. Jessica threw back the covers and padded into the main living area, where she found Ryan on his laptop at the dining table, phone pressed to his ear. He was already dressed in another impeccable suit, clearly ready for a business day, but he smiled when he saw her and held up one finger. I don't care what the board thinks, Mitchell. Make it happen. I'll be in the office by 10. He ended the call and set the phone down. Good morning. How did you sleep? Better than I have in years, Jessica admitted, tightening the robe around herself. But Ryan, I need to think about what happens next. I can't just hide here. You're not hiding. You're regrouping. He stood and moved to the kitchen, pulling out ingredients. And while you regroup, I have a proposition for you. Jessica's stomach dropped. Here it was. The catch. The real reason he had helped her. What kind of proposition? Ryan cracked eggs into a bowl, his movements efficient. I'm opening a new luxury resort in Colorado next month. I need someone to manage the guest experience program. Someone who understands what it's like to be overlooked and can ensure that never happens to our guests. Someone with grace under pressure and genuine empathy. He looked up at her, his expression serious. I think that someone is you. Jessica gaped at him. You want to give me a job? I have a degree in English literature from community college, and I've worked as a bookstore clerk and a museum docent. I have no qualifications for luxury hospitality. You have exactly the qualifications that matter. The rest you can learn. Ryan poured the eggs into a heated pan. I'm not offering this out of charity, Jessica. I'm offering it because I think you'll be brilliant at it. But it's your choice. You can take the job, build something of your own, or you can walk out that door right now. Either way, you're free. Free. The word echoed in her mind like a bell. When was the last time she had been free? And if I fail? She asked quietly. Then you fail, and you try something else. That's how life works when you're not being crushed under impossible expectations. Ryan plated the scrambled eggs along with toast and fresh fruit, setting everything on the table. But I don't think you're going to fail. Jessica sat down slowly, staring at the food. At this man who had appeared in her life like a storm and turned everything upside down. Why do you believe in me when no one else ever has? Ryan sat across from her, his gaze soft but intense. Because I see you, Jessica. The real you. And she's magnificent. Tears pricked her eyes again, but this time they were different. Not tears of pain, but of possibility. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do it. Ryan's smile could have powered the entire city. 3 days later, Jessica stood in Ryan's corporate office, wearing a borrowed outfit from his assistant, facing a laptop screen showing news coverage of the Carter family. Local socialite Jessica Carter has been reported missing following her sister's engagement party. The news anchor announced, the family is asking anyone with information to come forward. Jessica's phone, which Ryan had retrieved from the Carter mansion through a lawyer, buzzed constantly with messages. From her mother demanding she stop this childish behavior, from her father threatening to cut her off financially, not that she had ever been on, from Vanessa calling her selfish and dramatic, nothing had changed. They still saw her as a problem to manage, not a person to worry about. You don't have to respond, Ryan said from beside her. Not until you're ready. Jessica looked at him, this man who had given her shelter, opportunity, and something she had never expected to find: respect. Over the past 3 days, she had seen him in action, running his empire with sharp intelligence and surprising compassion. He was demanding but fair, powerful but kind. And the way he looked at her made her feel like she was the only person in the room. I'm ready, she said. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to her family. The message was short and clear. She was safe, she was leaving, and she would not be returning. She did not owe them explanations or apologies. She was simply done. When she hit send, the weight that had pressed on her chest for 26 years lifted. Ryan's hand found hers on the desk, his fingers intertwining with hers. How do you feel? Jessica turned to look at him, really look at him, and realized that somewhere in the past few days, her feelings had shifted into something deeper, more dangerous, more real. Terrified, she admitted. And alive. So incredibly alive. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. Good. That's exactly where you should be. Their eyes met and held, the air between them charged with possibility and promise. Jessica felt her breath catch as Ryan leaned closer, his intention clear in his darkening gaze. Tell me to stop, he murmured, and I will. But Jessica had spent her entire life stopping herself, holding back, making herself smaller. Not anymore. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. 2. Transformed Jessica Carter's world beyond recognition. The Colorado resort opened to rave reviews, with particular praise for the personalized guest experience program that Jessica had developed. She had thrown herself into the work with a passion she never knew she possessed. Discovering that she had an intuitive understanding of what made people feel valued and seen, Ryan had been right. She was brilliant at it. But more than the professional success, it was the personal transformation that left her breathless. Each morning, she woke up in the small apartment Ryan had helped her lease near the resort. And she chose her own clothes, made her own decisions, lived her own life. No one told her she wasn't good enough. No one compared her to her sister. No one made her feel invisible. And through it all, Ryan was there. Not hovering or controlling, but supporting. He visited the resort twice a week, always making time to have dinner with Jessica, to hear about her challenges and victories, to make her laugh with stories from his own corporate battles. Their relationship had deepened from that first kiss into something neither of them had anticipated. Real, profound love. Jessica was in her office reviewing guest feedback surveys when her assistant knocked tentatively. "Ms. Carter? There are some people here to see you. They say they're your family." Jessica's pen froze mid-notation. She had successfully avoided direct contact with the Carters for 2 months, responding only to legal communications through Ryan's attorney. What were they doing here? "Show them to the conference room," Jessica said, proud that her voice remained steady. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." She took those 5 minutes to breathe, to center herself, to remember that she was not the same woman who had fled into the rain. Then she walked into the conference room with her head high. Eleanor. Richard and Vanessa sat around the polished table, looking out of place in their Manhattan designer clothing against the rustic Colorado luxury. Her mother's face was tight with barely concealed anger, her father's expression calculating. Vanessa looked uncomfortable, which was perhaps the most surprising thing. "Jessica," Eleanor began, her tone falsely warm. "Finally, we've been trying to reach you for weeks." "I received your messages," Jessica replied calmly, remaining standing. "I chose not to respond." "What are you doing here?" Richard leaned back in his chair, attempting his usual domineering posture. "We're here because this nonsense has gone on long enough. You've made your point, embarrassed us sufficiently. It's time to come home." "I am home," Jessica said simply. "This is where I live and work now." "Work." Eleanor's laugh was sharp. "Playing hotel manager for your billionaire boyfriend is not a career, Jessica. It's a phase. And frankly, we need you back for the Worthington merger." Jessica felt a cold understanding settle over her. "What does the Worthington merger have to do with me?" Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, looking at her parents, then at Jessica. "Thomas's family is very traditional. They're concerned about family unity. They've made it clear that they expect all family members to be present and supportive for the wedding and subsequent business dealings." "So you need me to play the happy daughter for appearances?" Jessica said flatly. "To pretend we're a loving family, so your merger goes through smoothly?" "It's a family obligation," Richard said firmly. "We've supported you your entire life, and now we're asking for something in return." The audacity of that statement nearly made Jessica laugh. They had never supported her, never valued her, never seen her as anything but a disappointment. And now they wanted her to prop up their business deal? "No," she said. The single word seemed to echo in the silence that followed. "Excuse me?" Eleanor's voice dripped ice. "No," Jessica repeated, stronger this time. "I won't come back. I won't pretend we're something we're not. You humiliated me my entire life, treated me as less than, and the only time I matter to you is when you need something. So my answer is no." Richard stood abruptly, his face reddening. "You ungrateful little, I think you should leave." The new voice came from the doorway. Ryan stood there in a charcoal suit, his presence commanding and protective. He walked into the room and stood beside Jessica, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture of solidarity. "Mr. Blackwood," Richard tried to regain his composure. "This is a family matter." "Jessica is family to me," Ryan said coolly, "and I won't stand here and watch you bully her. She's given you her answer. I suggest you respect it." Eleanor stood as well, her eyes flashing between Jessica and Ryan. "This is about him, isn't it? He's poisoned you against us, filled your head with ideas." "No," Jessica said, her voice ringing clear. "He opened my eyes to what I deserved. He showed me that I was worth more than scraps of attention and conditional love. But I'm the one who chose to leave. I'm the one who built this new life. And I'm the one telling you now that I'm done." She took a deep breath, feeling Ryan's steady presence beside her, and continued. "I don't hate you. I actually feel sorry for you. Because you're so focused on image and status that you never learned how to actually love someone? Vanessa, I hope you find happiness with Thomas, truly. But I won't be at your wedding. Mom, Dad, I wish you well, but I won't be coming back to New York." Vanessa stood slowly, her eyes glistening. "Jess, I'm sorry. For what I said at the party? For all of it. I was terrible to you." Jessica felt her anger soften slightly at the genuine regret in her sister's voice. "I appreciate that, but an apology doesn't undo 26 years. Maybe someday we can rebuild something, but not now. Not like this." Eleanor grabbed her purse with sharp, angry movements. you're making a huge mistake. When this little romance falls apart and your job disappears, don't come crawling back to us. I won't, Jessica promised. Because even if everything fell apart tomorrow, I would still have something you never gave me: belief in myself. Richard moved toward the door, his expression hard. You're no longer a Carter as far as we're concerned? Good, Jessica said, and meant it. I never really was, anyway. The three of them filed out, Eleanor and Richard, radiating fury. Vanessa, pausing at the door to look back once with something like regret before following. When they were gone, Jessica's legs suddenly felt weak. Ryan caught her, guiding her into a chair and kneeling beside her. You were amazing, he said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'm shaking, Jessica admitted with a shaky laugh, because you just did something incredibly brave. Ryan took both her hands in his. Jessica, I need to tell you something. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid of scaring you away. Jessica's heart stuttered. What is it? I'm in love with you. The words were simple, direct, and utterly sincere. I think I started falling for you that night in the rain, watching you be so vulnerable and so strong all at once. And every day since, I've fallen deeper. I love your kindness, your resilience, your brilliant mind. I love the way you notice small details and the way you light up when you talk about guest experiences. I love you, Jessica. All of you. Tears spilled down Jessica's cheeks, but these were tears of joy so pure it almost hurt. I love you too. God, Ryan, I love you so much it terrifies me. He stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. Don't be terrified. Be excited. Because I'm going to spend every day proving to you how extraordinary you are. Jessica looked up at him, this man who had saved her by showing her how to save herself. Promise me something? Anything. Promise me you'll never stop seeing me. The real me. Ryan cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense and full of promise. Jessica Carter, I will never stop seeing you. You are the most visible, vibrant, incredible woman I have ever known. And if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that. He kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. Jessica melted into him, letting herself feel everything she had suppressed for so long: desire, hope, love, joy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she was smiling wider than she ever had before. So what happens now? She asked. Ryan grinned, that devastating smile that made her heart race. Now we live. We build. We love. We create something beautiful together. Your family tried to make you small, but Jessica, you were always meant to shine. Jessica looked out the conference room window at the snow-capped mountains beyond. At the resort she had helped bring to life, at the world of possibility stretching before her. She thought about the girl who had fled into the rain, broken and defeated, and the woman standing here now, whole and fierce and free. I'm ready, she said. Turning back to Ryan, I'm ready to shine. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Then let's light up the whole damn sky. 6 months later, Jessica stood in a different conference room in the same resort, presenting her guest experience program expansion to a room full of hospitality executives. Her own company, not Ryan's, though he sat in the back row watching with obvious pride. She had taken the skills she developed and launched her own consulting firm, helping luxury properties worldwide create more personalized, empathetic guest experiences. The presentation ended to enthusiastic applause. As the executives filed out, already talking about contracts and partnerships, Ryan made his way to the front. You were magnificent, he said, pulling her into his arms. I had a good teacher, Jessica replied, kissing him softly. You had natural talent. I just gave you the space to discover it. Ryan pulled back slightly, his expression suddenly nervous in a way she had never seen before. Actually, speaking of space, I was hoping you might be willing to share some of yours. Jessica tilted her head, confused. What do you mean? Ryan took a deep breath and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, dropping to one knee right there in the empty conference room. Jessica's hands flew to her mouth, her heart threatening to beat right out of her chest. Jessica Carter, You transformed my life the moment you took my hand in the rain. You showed me what real strength looks like, what true grace means. I don't just love you, I admire you. I respect you. I am in awe of you every single day. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner in this extraordinary life you're building? Through tears of absolute joy, Jessica pulled him to his feet. Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and stunning, just like everything else he had given her. They kissed as the Colorado sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Jessica had been humiliated by her family, had run into the rain in tears. But that night had not been an ending. It had been a beginning. The beginning of discovering who she really was. The beginning of understanding her own worth. The beginning of a love that saw her, truly saw her. For the first time in her life, she had been told she would never shine, that she would always be a shadow. They had been wrong. Jessica Carter blazed like the sun, and nothing would ever dim her light again. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.